Jay, I just got back from the dentist, and half of my lip is super floppy right now.
My both sides of my lip are really floppy. I have a lot of scar tissue from getting my lip busted. How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about you having scar tissue in your lip?
Yeah, and it being floppy and having my lip busted.
I have no feelings, but I'm certainly uncomfortable because I'm going to sound a little bit droopy here.
No.
My lip is falling.
No.
No what?
You can't sound droopy. That's that would be like an inflection in your voice, and you sound normal. You've created this narrative in your mind.
I have not created. It's harder for me to talk.
But that's you. That's how you feel.
Like,
that's not how you sound. You sound fine. You sound normal.
This is the F sound I make right now.
It sounds like an F to me.
That sounds like an F?
Yeah, it does. Can I tell you a story real quick about my droopy lips?
I guess, even though I was in the middle of my story about my droopy lips.
It's fine. It's fine. So my grandmother once told me that she would give me $1,000 if I got like plastic surgery to fix my lips. And I was like, what? First of all, I don't think you have $1,000. And second of all, why do you care? And she was like, you have such a beautiful face to have it ruined. And I was like, I look fine. I look fine, Grandma. What's wrong with grandmas?
That's the fucking story?
Yeah, she tried to pay me $1,000 to get plastic surgery just because I got my lips busted a couple times.
Your grandma doesn't even have $1,000. Is that the one we're waiting on to die?
No, that's my grandfather.
Okay.
She's Poe.
Poe Dameron?
Can't stand it.
The things that I do for Collider, I'm so uncomfortable, but we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it through here. I had an interesting conversation with Frank last night. Interesting because it was the first actual conversation I had ever had with Frank, and it was so enlightening and fascinating. And we talked for like an hour about just anything, and I learned a lot indirectly from our conversation, and I just I valued it tremendously. One of my favorite things that he said was, Afterthoughts is the very first podcast he's ever listened to. Isn't that absurd? I don't know if he wanted Collider to know that he does not take in new media, but I've proven in the past that I cannot be trusted. I use all of these people for information, and I have no integrity, so I will just spout it here on the podcast. But I love that fun fact.
Well, congratulations, Frank, because you've literally heard the best audio you could possibly hear in the podcast landscape. So, you're welcome.
That, and he's read the best podcast descriptions on the Collider Podcast Network.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah. If it doesn't involve me having an F sound.
Which one is Frank again? Is he the one on the Collider Gaming?
You know what? Shame on the Collider crew that still acts like they are strangers to us. Over the past 2.5 years for me, over the past year for you, it's like, shame on them. I had the best conversation with Frank, and he's a total stranger. I've known him the least amount, especially people like the Wangers, who are our age and are supposed to be friendly with us more than anybody. We have more in common with the Wangers than anybody in that studio, probably. Shame on everyone who has continued to just be weird, interacting with us, and not even interacting. I just valued mine and Frank's conversation last night, and I thought about all of the other people that I've never had that with. They should be ashamed of themselves, and I'm being dead serious.
You thought Cody Hall was mad at you this past week, but you have no confirmation if that's the case or not.
We'll get to that on the other side. Thank you so much for checking out Collider Afterthoughts, the show that examines the content and fandom at Collider. I'm Ryan Snelling.
Hey.
I've got Jaye Williams.
That's
What's
me.
up?
It's me, Jay to the A to the Y to the E. I hope you're doing fantastic today. You listen to the smooth sounds of Afterthoughts. I am convinced this week more than any other week that no one is listening to us because we don't have the YouTube video. We don't have any feedback from Collider other than Frank. So did our episode go up last week? Did it actually go up?
On YouTube?
No, on the podcast feed. I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, I know it did, but this is more for effect. In fact, it went up twice. Am I incorrect about that?
No, you're not. I don't know. And going back to what you said about Cody, I think Cody got irritated with me when I was just as irritated. Actually, I was irritated, but I didn't know it was at him. He got mad at me because I apparently have been sending him files that aren't the proper settings. And I asked Christian for verification. I was like,
verification.
Stop. Leave me alone. The droopiness. I asked Christian for verification. I was like, does the podcast network have a bandwidth limit? Is there a reason that you guys need a particular size, a bit rate for your podcast? And he said no. But apparently I've been sending these like massive MP3s because, we do it our way. They do it their own way, which is perfectly fine. The problem is we're 7 episodes deep and no one gave me the memo until it was tweeted at me in a passive-aggressive fashion.
Well, your claim and your interpretation, because that's what everything is when it comes to text conversations, it's all based on interpretation.
Sure.
Your interpretation is that he was angry, that he was mad at you.
I think he was peeved.
I think I told you off air, I said, go ahead and read those back. Just read those back, but in like a fun, like jokey way. How was that experience?
It didn't change my mind at all.
Of course.
You just made me care less about the fact that he might have been mad.
Well, there you go. That's what I'm here for. My temperature on Cody Hall in general is that he's just a fun guy. I don't think I've ever actually seen him get actually angry. So it was just hard for me to believe that he was actually upset about anything in particular. But yeah, that's just my perspective.
I think those wangers get a little testy when you ask them how the upload is going, because it was a conversation between myself and Frank, and Cody brought himself in to make the dig, and he thought that I was taking a shot when I wasn't at all. Like you said, it's up to interpretation, but I didn't get the memo that the file was supposed to be a particular way. A lot of people were being testy over there. Ellis was a little testy on Movie Talk as well with some of our criticism last week.
Well, Collider doesn't issue memos, or if they do, they don't do it in the most eco-friendly way possible, which is digitally via email. I feel like if they did issue memos, we would be attached to the email chain, but we're not. So somebody over there, probably Roca, is handing out paper memos to everybody to inform people on the day-to-day ins and outs of Collider in Burbank.
Did you see the Instagram story of someone throwing a ball at Roca? And he was all business. Did you see that?
I didn't. I think I missed it. Did he get upset?
He was just sitting at his desk typing away. Whoever was holding the phone filming it threw like a tennis ball or something like that. Just kind of lobbed it over to his workstation. It didn't hit his computer. It didn't hit him. It just kind of got in his way. And he did not break eye contact with his computer. And you could just hear him mumble, "Stop it, I'm working."
Was it Makuga? Did Makuga do it? Doesn't he run the social media?
I hope not. You know what's funny about Dorian? And I noticed this about Adam Hlavik as well, who competed in Inner Geekdom who competed in an Inner Geekdom match earlier this week. It's like, I don't know, some of you guys might be audio engineers. The way Adam Hlavik speaks... The way that Adam Hlavik speaks and the way that Dorian speaks, they both have limiters on their voice to where their voice never, ever changes. Have you ever noticed that?
That's not how a limiter works. Are you just speaking in the sense that they're monotone. They don't change the inflection of what they're saying.
Yeah, it's sort of like a monotone, but it's like when you're think about how you would film a promo. Think about how you would film a promo if you were competing in the Schmoedown. There'd be more energy. You'd be yelling. Adam Hlavic's voice never changes, but he's animated in the way that you would think. So it's just kind of funny to witness. And Dorian kind of has that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to see people. I think you can tell a lot about somebody doing their Schmoedown promo just because it's obviously something that's necessary, especially for the hype of a match, for the storyline potentially, and maybe not everybody's. I feel like some people are more comfortable with it than others. Somebody like Roka, obviously, who watches a lot of professional wrestling, they sort of get it. Yeah. Not saying that other people don't get it. There's like a comfort level, like some sort of residual vibration that you have to land on in order to do that just right. I remember Rachel Cushing's first ever interview, or not interview, but her promo that she cut for Collider, and she was so nervous, and it was crazy it's crazy to look back on now, considering how incredible she is as a performer, and she's sort of grown into that role. So I think you can, for all those people that fast forward past promos and stuff like that, I do think you can learn a lot from just watching just those quick little snippets of things.
I think that the opening promo is probably the hardest thing that those competitors have to do, because they're just vulnerable and out there alone, like you said. And Rachel, it's just hard to have something to come up with every week. And I know that Christian is kind of feeding some stuff to him. Did I just make a fart noise? Christian is feeding some stuff to them off camera, but they still have to be able to do it, and they still have to be interesting, and they still have to be unique. And they do that multiple times throughout the year, and it's just hard because that could easily be the least interesting part of a Schmoedown, only because it's just a really hard thing to do. And I give everybody a lot of credit for doing that kind of stuff.
It's weird because I don't know the timeline of when they cut those promos, but it seems to me, for me personally, like I'm not going to compete in a Schmoedown, so please don't at me with anything. We've talked about this. We've gone over this. But if I ever was going to compete, I feel like that cutting the promo time would be sort of like, sort of letting loose a little bit, like stretching your limbs, maybe brushing the cobwebs off or getting the butterflies out, just to have a little bit of fun and maybe not take it so serious in that moment. Not saying that you shouldn't take those promos serious, but it might just be a good time for you to kind of just let loose a little bit before you actually compete.
Right. I just think it's way easier to perform when you're at the table, when you come out of the curtain, and you can like play off of everybody. You can take shots at your competitor. You can respond to Christian and Ken or whoever's announcing. You can respond to the crowd. That's an easier game to play than it is to sort of perform on your own like that, because you're just a lot more vulnerable. So anyway, ton of credit there. To go back to Ellis addressing our Twitter question criticism. For one, his response was hilarious, because I know that that's something he's had to have had multiple conversations with people about that. Like, this is obviously a frustration that's been pent up in Mark Ellis for a long time, whether it's with people complaining that he's not doing it or he's complaining about the questions that he gets. So I was cracking up at him doing that. So he took a shot at us and said, he's never seen us ask Twitter questions. I actually know of an episode specifically where I asked a question, and he's the one that hosted the show. It actually happened the week that Batman v Superman came out. So I could definitely go back and find my Twitter questions. The thing is, though, the irony is that he found my Twitter question that moment, and I asked it. That specific Twitter question that I tweeted, I have had that on deck for probably the last year. That has been my go-to question. Every time I tweeted at Collider the past year, it's been that question. So not only is it possible that he skipped it because he didn't like it, but I've actually been tweeting it out this entire time, and he just so happened to pick it out that day. So there's a lot of layers to that story and a lot of reasons why I found a lot of humor in that.
Yeah, it was an interesting sort of back and forth. I could sense the playfulness in his voice, but I could also sense the annoyance, which I totally get. I totally get that because, yeah, it's one thing for us to criticize. Hey, choose some different Twitter questions. What the fuck haven't you asked anything, prick? Which that's more of like a Christian take, I guess. But prick, I think prick. I think for me, like Twitter questions or just questions like that in general aren't specifically my style. I'm not saying I'm too cool for them or anything. It's not something that I really sit around and think about. Like, what would be a great question to ask Movie Talk? But now, I guess he's issued the challenge. I may actually have to do that.
I think it was a pretty good question, and I think they enjoyed my question because it's not something that they typically get asked. And I did recognize the humor in Ellis's response, not in Cody's. I messaged
one was
Cody.
spoken to you, one was in text form.
No, I messaged Cody to ask him what settings he would prefer, and his response in all caps was, "I'm not mad, I'm just joking." And I was like, I'm just asking you how I can help. I don't care about this at all. So yeah, all around, great interactions between Collider Afterthoughts and the Collider crew. Where the hell is Mark Fernandez?
Well, he was in China. We know that.
He's been all over the place, and I feel like he's not. I feel like he's managing from afar because I haven't seen a whole lot of him in the studio. It always feels like maybe it's because Christian's been off camera a lot more, and I'm just assuming that Christian is playing more of a managerial role instead of being an on-camera person. Not that he doesn't typically, just enough more so to the point where he can't be on camera as much. I know there was the one day that it rained and he was just late, but that's just how I'm interpreting that. I'm seeing a lot of Instagram. Fernandez is jet setting all over the place, and there were a couple people that are on camera less because of it. So do you have any, are you reading into that at all?
I'm not necessarily reading into it per se. I think, listen, if I'm being honest, we've had conversations off air, you and I, and even with him about potentially coming on to this show to sort of talk about how, the first 6 months of this new era of Collider has gone, where he wants to go in the future. I think that invitation still exists, so I think maybe we'll see if he's still listening or not. That's what I'm very curious about. I think it would be interesting and nice too, just for everybody, even people that don't tune into this show, even if he were to do that. I think it would be nice for more people to sort of know the ins and outs of what's going on. I get not showing all your cards and this and that, but would you like to see another town hall sort of thing, maybe like in the fall or maybe towards the end of the year, just to sort of see what's going on within the company?
Jay, we talk about it every week. We feel like we don't know anything. Not only do we feel like we don't know anything, but we feel like the fans, like that don't have the privilege of hosting this show, we feel like they're in the dark.
It's like he's dumb or something.
Yeah.
Cue Frank Ocean's song Novocaine.
I just feel like everybody's in the dark with a lot of things right now, and that's why we. I made a joke with Frank because he told me he wasn't going to tell me. I asked him a question, and he jokingly said that he wasn't going to answer, and I threw out some random. I made an assumption that was completely wrong to the point where it forced him to correct me. And I laughed and was like, that's how it's done. That's how we find out everything that we're not supposed to find out, is by assuming something incorrectly and forcing everyone to correct us. And then that's how we accidentally come across scoops and things like that. But yeah, another town hall is definitely welcome. It's definitely wanted. I want to know more about Collider Games. I want to know if they are moving away from the short form stuff and make it, I just want to know it all. So I think quarterly is probably pushing it, but I would like maybe 2 or 3 times a year. That'd be nice.
2 or 3 times a year for a town hall?
Sure.
Jeez, no,
What's
I'm
wrong
not
with
on board with that.
What's wrong with that?
That's too many. I don't even know if they make enough like major decisions that many. Well,
You just stated that you wanted another one, and that's your second one right there.
I said I would like another one in the fall or towards the end of the year, so that we got one earlier on in the year and then one later in the year. I think one per half of the year might be nice for people. I mean, now if you're talking about like a potential Q&A sort of thing where they're a little bit more transparent on that, that's something a little bit different. The town hall to me is something that it's sort of like a statement of intent or a state of the union, so to speak, about where we are and where we're going. I think it's good. I think fans need stuff like that, like beyond how many times it should or shouldn't happen. I think fans need that. I think it helps fans out. I think it helps the narrative of whatever the fans are saying. I know not all fans are negative or doom and gloom, and I definitely don't think that's an overwhelming temperature at all, but I think it definitely helps a lot of people out just having sort of a roadmap of things to look forward to. And we're getting a lot more information from Collider just by default because they are doing things like stepping up their promotion game, their marketing game, and they're showing us more stuff on social media, and all that stuff is fantastic. But I know there are things within the ins and outs, and hopefully we can illuminate some of those things on the show anytime we talk to an employee at Collider. But I think those town halls are beneficial for the greater community. Obviously, they're not going to get a bunch of new fans or anything like that, but for the existing fans, which it is important to cultivate those people, I think it would be very beneficial.
Yeah, maybe I can talk Christian into giving me some scoops. I know I'm a loudmouth. I get it, but maybe I can figure out a way to earn his trust. That way he can feed us a little bit of information. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, Christian? Jay?
Prick. Yeah. It's easy for me to stay tight-lipped about stuff.
Not me.
Listen. When Papa wow, now I can't talk. Maybe I've got the droopy lip. Wait, I already do. When Papa Harloff calls you on the phone and you're making nachos in the middle of the night, vegetarian nachos, it's hard to pay attention. He made sure to tell me. He said, well, I noticed you didn't talk about one-on-one last week very much. I said, yeah, man. It's a lot of stuff to go through. And I'm busy at my day job.
Yeah.
But then he dropped this, I don't know where it is in the rundown, but then he was like, well, Freddie Prinze Jr. is going to be on. And I was like, oh, well, holy shit. I would actually, not that I'm not interested in the other things that you have going on with one-on-one, because I am, but Freddie Prinze Jr. is an individual that I enjoy quite a bit.
Yeah, me too. I think as Collider grows, I think we're probably going to have episodes of Afterthoughts that don't cover every single little thing. Like, I don't have a whole lot on Council. Actually, we are going to talk about solo coverage, but it's not specifically about Jedi Council. I don't have a whole lot on Heroes. I don't have a whole lot on Movie Talk this week, and that's probably just going to happen. The more stuff that breaks, all the new stuff rolling in. And talk about dropping bombs this week. We got a couple. I want to talk about the first one that we dropped. And so Collider got a new hire in Jeff Sneider, and I will read the Collider.com report because I think some people still had questions as to what Jeff Sneider will be doing. Jeff Sneider is working out of Collider's Burbank office. Snyder will be heading up the Collider News series on Collider Video and will be tasked with breaking news both on Collider Video and Collider.com. He'll also be regularly contributing to Movie Talk. I don't think his title... No, I didn't read his title. I think it's just Collider News Director or something like that. So they just picked up Snyder. Snyder has been a personality in the Schmoedown for the past couple of years, and I've been made aware of him because I know that he played in the Sandbox over there at the Rap and a couple of other avenues. I want to know, what was your reaction to this? Because this is the kind of stuff that I don't think Collider Afterthoughts can ever predict something like this. Going back to, like, Fernandez was talking about sort of filling up some of the backroom seats as opposed to the on-air personalities. This is not something that we can actually gauge very well. So what was your reaction to this news?
Well, I think it's an interesting hire for the sole fact that Collider is already outfitted with this on-screen talent and people who are in the position to help aid that and help aid in creating content. And they're full of pundits and this and that. And then they have this whole other arm of the .com, which does help with reporting and all of that. But we've talked before about bridging that gap, and it seems like anytime Steve Weintraub comes over, it's just somebody's coming over from the .com to help with this and that. It seems to me like Jeff Sneider is essentially that news individual, that scoop individual, that reporter individual who is in-house at Collider Studios. Maybe not specifically in-house like he's there every single day. Maybe he works from the comfort of his own home and he comes in on an as-needed basis, but he's essentially servicing, I mean, I'm sure he's servicing both, right? It's an arm that can help both sides. And
I just said he's working out of the Burbank office.
yeah, but that's not, but what I'm saying is, I mean, maybe he's not always there. Maybe he could be, I mean, he could still do this job at home, right? I mean, unless it's coming there for on-screen, that's really beside the point. It doesn't really
heading up the Collider News series.
It doesn't matter where he is every single day. He could be anywhere and do this job unless he needs to be actually on screen. My point is that he services both sides. The .com, he can help in regards to that with providing scoops. He can also service people on screen with this news stuff. I think that's a very interesting role to fill. I think it's an important role to fill for Collider because they lean on news. They lean on what we've talked about, the news cycle, the peaks and valleys of the news cycle, and to get somebody like Jeff Sneider, who is known for his scoops, he is known for breaking a lot of news, to sort of put him in their arsenal is a very interesting move, and I think it's a very, very smart move. That's my most objective outlook on the whole thing. If I'm being completely honest, hashtag transparency, not going to beat around the bush. We have had some past history with Jeff Sneider in terms of like his interactions with people and this and that. I'm not going to just completely avoid that conversation, but my whole thing, we had a conversation about this off air, and I've sort of said this to some people who were asking me, it's that, look, as far as I'm concerned, it's water under the bridge, and I'm going to give Jeff Sneider the same treatment I give everybody on Collider. I'm going to be I'll offer praise when praise is deserved. I'll offer criticism when criticism is deserved. But every single person on this planet Earth gets a fresh start with me. I'm excited to see what he has to bring to the table.
I'm going to have to play a wait and see game, only because you and I don't think we've ever had a conversation about the Collider News video series being like part of the future. We kind of just, at least I won't speak for you, but I've always used Collider News as sort of like a way to optimize the YouTube channel, if you will, because of course they're very timely and topical videos naturally. So, but I mean, they're sometimes hit or miss. You can't always gauge how well they're going to do because, again, everything has its own. They put out a Roseanne thing. Like, they even, they are not afraid to talk about TV on Collider News, which I find interesting. That's how topical it can be. So the wait and see game, it's partially because I just need to be able to look at it. I need to be able to see what everybody has in mind. The news aspect of Collider isn't the part that I always thought was going to take it to the next level, and that's not me saying it shouldn't be a priority. I'm saying that that's just not what was at the forefront of my mind, to be totally honest. So I just need to be able to look at it a little bit. The thing that does not excite me about this hire is that I do not take to scoop culture. It is really annoying. It's why Ellis has a particular.
You acknowledge that it's a part of all this, though, right? Is that's a fair statement?
What I don't like about scoop culture, what I don't like, it's the same reason why I don't listen to sports radio. It's the reason why I listen to Le Batard over classic sports radio. It's that they are so overly serious about scoop culture, and it's really super annoying. And Ellis does not play that game. As a matter of fact, the first thing that I thought of when they said that Snyder was going to be a regular on Movie Talk, I didn't talk to Ellis about this. I've had previous conversations way back when about him hosting Movie Talk. I don't think he's into that either. So it might create a weird dynamic. Ellis might play ball because Snyder is at a position that's higher up than Ellis. But I don't want Movie Talk to become something that is overly serious because of scoop culture, because it always has to be so overly serious and ethical. I'm going to have to play wait and see, because that's not something that I've ever responded to, and I don't know how I feel about it, because it may or may not affect everything moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a justifiable worry just in general, and like a really big picture thing, like when it's presented, like basically how you've laid it out. But I don't think we have any evidence that that's specifically going to be the case, especially because currently, as it stands, their news stuff is so topical. It's so reactionary in a good way. They're super quick to put out a lot of these news stories that the news stuff, in terms of breaking news, we know that it comes from their Collider news videos.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens that a lot of what Movie Talk is, the landscape that Ellis has painted on Movie Talk, and probably even prior to, is that it's discussion based. It's discussing the news that's come before it. In fact, this week, a lot of the large discussion topics on Movie Talk were already covered in the breaking news story. We already got that dose of information, and then we covered it more long form on Movie Talk. I think Jeff Sneider's inclusion on Movie Talk, on the Movie Talk panel, when it actually happens, is, and I'm anxious to see how often it does happen, but I think his inclusion could purely just be because they've hired a new person. It's a new face. It's a new individual, and he's capable of talking about movies. What I will say is, love or hate his character on the Schmoedown, which he does obviously portray a heel. I think people should obviously get this from his Schmoedown performances. He's incredibly knowledgeable, and I do value his perspective on films outside of the scoop stuff. Obviously, has a talent for that. If you have a talent for it, then you should go for it and use that to your advantage. I agree with you that the scoop culture thing from time to time does get overly serious. I think too many companies, too many businesses build themselves on the backs of scoops, when after a while that can become a very uninteresting conversation. That's why I like longer form discussion things, which is, I think, what you're speaking to. I don't think we have anything to worry about, though. I think they've outfitted the company with somebody where it's necessary to put them in the place where they've put Jeff Sneider.
Yeah, I'm trying to be fair and just, because it might be a seamless transition. Like, we might not, aside from him appearing on Movie Talk, we might not even be totally aware. I can't really think of anybody who breaks news on video yet. Somebody could probably let me know in the comment section, because I am putting this up on YouTube, but I want to know if there is an outlet out there that does actually break news for the first time via YouTube video, because it's not ringing a bell for me right now. If you watch,
you mean from a movie perspective, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So like, Christian even talked a little bit about this on Harloff and Ellis. He sort of talked about when Schmoedown.com was breaking scoops, and there was a time when him and Snyder didn't get along because of it. Like, and I've seen Umberto go crazy. All of the ethics, I understand the ethics, and I understand the pride that people like Frosty have within their job. It doesn't interest me in any way. I don't care who breaks what. It only matters to them, and I get it. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm not saying they shouldn't take pride in what they do. I'm saying it doesn't interest me. So if that becomes apparent on my Collider video, it's just going to be less fun. And that's all I'm saying. But again, benefit of the doubt, that might not even be the case. It is the first thing that came across my mind. I was also looking at some of the tweets and the reactions to this press release, if you will. Not everybody is excited, and I think some people are letting his Schmoedown persona break through, and that might be confusing to some people too, right? Because I'm talking about, like, I don't want Snyder to take himself way too seriously when he does a good job not taking himself seriously on the Schmoedown. So I know that might sound weird for people, and I get it. It's more of a commentary on Scoops than Jeff Sneider. But I don't think everybody is excited about this. There were a couple people that brought up a previous appearance that he had on Movie Talk, and I went to go check it out. Not only do I not have a problem with who he is on Movie Talk, if anything, that's not even a great reflection because he didn't work there. He probably has a greater understanding of what Movie Talk is now, so he'd probably do really well on the show.
How long ago was this? Actually, I'm not familiar with what you're referencing.
So this was the day after the very first Assassin's Creed trailer dropped.
Okay.
And
interesting.
It was funny. You've talked about going back and watching previous episodes and seeing how their takes hold up. Snyder, before anybody was on point with his Assassin's Creed takes. He literally called everything when it came to how that movie would perform, and he nailed it. So that was actually something I valued, and I didn't get why people were calling that such an offensive appearance on Movie Talk. I've seen far worse on Movie Talk, let me tell you.
Can I bring something up just while we're on this specific point about predictions and this and that?
Yeah.
We got a lot. So from time to time, we get some tweets from people that are trying to get us to talk about one thing or another. And we had this whole thing where I had reached out to people and asked, like, oh, what do you guys think about, or what would you guys want us to talk about? What do you like? What do you dislike? And do you remember people going in on Christian for his solo box office prediction?
Yeah. I do.
How much is he fucking laughing at those dum-dums for even, first of all, it should have never been an issue. Like, whatever somebody's box, like when Ellis made that box office prediction about Beauty and the Beast, it was more funny than anything, right? Like, nobody was up in arms about it. So everybody needs to chill the hell out. Sorry, I just had to, that's been on my mind all week.
Well, did you watch Harloff and Ellis?
Yes.
Is that a fake take?
No, it's not.
Okay, so he mentioned that a little bit. He
right.
He sort of brought up his response because there was a guy, and I was actually involved in it because the guy brought it up. He tagged Christian and then asked me to address it on here. Well, wait, were you involved in that? Were you tagged in that?
Yes, I started the whole thing. I started the whole interaction.
No, I don't think he was responding to you. I think he just did it out of nowhere. This is two different things, but it falls under the same umbrella. Anyway, Christian was talking about this guy railing on him, and my stance was, honestly, I don't give a shit if Christian is right or wrong about this because it's speculation. I don't take it seriously. I just sort of nail it down to speculation is fun to talk about. Christian is not, I don't view Christian lesser in my eye if he's right or wrong about the fucking solo box office. It's like, if he's wrong, then it's like, man, it's crazy. He was wrong. Okay, moving on. It's not something that I'm not gonna crucify Christian for, because I don't think any of these people know what the hell they're talking about anyway. Because that's just my stance on speculation across all avenues, not just movie news. It's like all of this stuff is just fun to talk about for me. I don't take it that seriously. So I don't think lesser of these people for doing that. And you're right, though. I think Christian was having a little bit of fun because he does get to he might regret going back on his word a little bit, but ultimately he was right and had nothing to apologize for.
Yeah.
Do you want to segue into the solo coverage? Is that what you were doing?
Well, just real quick, I do want to bring up one interesting thing about Harloff and Ellis that I thought it was hilarious this week that all this solo coverage, and I'm sure we'll talk about it when we get into movie talk stuff a little bit, or I don't know where that is on your rundown, but specifically talking about Roca. Anyways, I found it hilarious that there was all this solo Fallout stuff that was going on this week that was really talking about like a lot of big picture Star Wars stuff, a lot of interesting industry Star Wars stuff. I love the coverage that we got from everybody. I definitely love the coverage and the perspective that Ellis gave this week. I'm now super attuned to Ellis's really sit back and listen to both sides and give his perspective. I think he's great at that. But I was so hungry for Christian's perspective throughout this entire week, and he was essentially absent through most of through all the movie talks we've seen up until this point. And I was like, man, I really want to know what Christian has to say about this. It's funny that he gave it's actually, I don't think it was calculated at all, but that's sort of how you calculate things to maximize things. Like, if other people were hungry for his take, to have his first actual public appearance discussion be on Harloff and Ellis, that's a great like marketing thing for Harloff and Ellis. I mean, obviously you're going to get it on Jedi Council, but what a nice little nugget to just sort of shoehorn it into Harloff and Ellis. Like
so that. You and I had a pretty, a very passionate conversation about Solo. You and I enjoyed the film a lot. As the weekend went on and we got the reactions, we saw the reactions that the movie received. I became overly passionate because I think I enjoyed the movie, and I will admit that I was probably a little overly passionate to the point it was slightly irrational. But since The Last Jedi, I have not looked forward to Star Wars coverage on Collider or in the movie news space in general. It's not just a Collider thing, but it's not fun. And it's not fun like Infinity War was. And I do think, because I am the one watching Collider for this show, part of it was on Collider, though. Monday's movie talk, or excuse me, I guess it was Tuesday's movie talk, because Monday was pre-recorded for the holiday. Tuesday's movie talk was really, really annoying to me, and I did not like the turn that Collider was taking. That was Ellis hosting Perry and Roca, and I know you got a bit on this as well, but I just did not have fun as a Star Wars fan, and it was more than just disagreeing with what seems to be the loud populace of the Star Wars majority, if you will, but they just did a lot of things I didn't like. And like even the .com, and I'm not, he since corrected it, but yesterday .com posted a dopey headline that spoiled part of the movie, and I was like, since when does Collider do things like that? And he did correct it after, plenty of people called him out on it, and I was like, what is that? And I just didn't have a great week with the coverage. A lot of hyperbole. Single-handedly, the best conversation I've heard in general about Solo was Christian and Ellis on Harloff and Ellis, because they were able to actually discuss it. They were actually reasonable. One thing that I was missing, and they might have said it, to be fair, they might have said it on Movie Talk, and I might have just not heard it, but I didn't actually know the full budget for Solo. And Christian was able to sort of break that down a little bit, and it's closer to like 500 million. Whereas if you Google budget for Han Solo, it'll say 250 million. So I thought the 250 million was the two movie in one number. Like Solo maybe only cost like 80 or 90 million. Yeah. So the best conversation easily was on Harloff and Ellis, but everything else was just annoying and just really disappointing, because I thought it was a lot of hyperbole, and I hated the overreactions that Star Wars had to change anything when I felt like the main lesson learned a year ago when Kathleen Kennedy figured out she needs to keep her eye on the ball a little bit with her directors. I will quit my Star Wars take. How did you respond to Collider's Solo coverage?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think my honest reaction is that this was an interesting week to watch, where I like legitimately just didn't agree with a lot of the perspectives that were being given. It's not often, and I really hesitate to use this word because I don't think that it's what's going on, but I can categorize it with this. It's not often that we get this collective quote unquote agenda, which it wasn't an agenda. They weren't trying to sway anything into a particular direction, but we got this collective voice and opinion, it seems like, of what was going on with the news cycle this week, which is very strange and very peculiar because it seemed like a lot of this news that came out about Solo was looked at, examined, and almost just expanded upon too much. Like, maybe not even too much. Just we started going into speaking out of turn territory, like expanding on simple ideas that just weren't actually, it wasn't actually what was going on, right? Does that make sense? Like certain ideas that were being presented as potential that just were going off into left field as like, this is actually something that's going on and taking place. What were you going to say?
I was just going to agree that I think, like I said, I think part of it was they were playing into the hyperbole around the film. And I'm someone who thinks I'm not at all precious about Star Wars. Like, I thank God I didn't grow up with Star Wars the way that Christian and Ellis did, because I love that I'm able to embrace The Last Jedi as easily as I do, whereas it's probably harder for some of those people because they just have a different perspective. I am not precious about Star Wars, but I am apologetic for it, and I think Star Wars is just like any other franchise. It has its flaws, and I just don't think their views on this setback is the equivalent of another setback in a franchise, if you will. Like, they were just overly sort of harsh about it. Like, and I was sort of coming from the perspective of, why can't Star Wars just make 100 million opening weekend? Like, it's Star Wars can have its Thor: The Dark World, and the only unfortunate side of it is that they had to change directors. Anyway,
so
I just you're right.
For me, from my perspective, the conversation was hard to watch because, for one, I've been open about this. I've been upfront about this. We talk about this a lot on Sight and Sound. I do not come from the quote-unquote movie fandom bubble. In fact, the only reason that I'm in it as much as I am now is because, for one, I do another show that talks about movies, and I'm sort of like just a guy that can have the conversations, but also because of this show. And I'm able to sort of look at things and be like, this is kind of just a bubble conversation, but also because of my background with media studies and studying data and statistics centered around media, that's what I went to college for. It's very difficult for me to see a week's worth of hyperbole, a week's worth of conversation, a week's worth of jumping to conclusions about things based on such a small sample size. That is very, very, very important to note. Yeah. $80 million. This isn't a movie take, so hopefully if Christians will say, oh, why are they talking about movies?
No, it doesn't matter. Go ahead.
If $80 million seems like a lot of money, it is a lot of money. And it's a lot of people that went out to pay their money to see a film. However, it's not a lot of money in terms of how many people will ever see this movie. Does that make sense? So to shift and curate an entire conversation based around such a small sample size, to me, it just seemed like reaching a little bit. It seemed like trying to, I hate using the word fearmonger, but fearmonger in the sense where it's like try to heighten the drama surrounding a potential situation just because it creates a conversation for people to watch. That's not me being overcritical about the content that we got, because I think it's important to explore a lot of things, but I think it's also very important to identify what we're talking, and they might know things that we don't know, right? Like, we've had this conversation a million times, like maybe they do know inside information that we're not aware of. Even with that removed, it's very difficult to sit down and listen to a conversation about where things can go based off of the results of an opening weekend. Those conversations are not being had by anyone else but people inside of this bubble. And I know that this channel appeals to those individuals, but we have to get out of that mindset that we're only appealing to those individuals, and that a lot of casual fans, as Christian and Mark both pointed out on Harloff and Ellis, the casual fans, especially from what I can gather, it seems like a lot of people enjoyed this movie for the most part. So I just don't know how inviting this week has been for those people.
I do think that I at least want Collider to have the most reasonable takes with all of this stuff. And that was part of what annoyed me about Rocha, is he actually used, I think part of his take on Tuesday was he was trying to include people outside the bubble. And as he was speaking, I was saying to myself, you're not accurately portraying or thinking the same way that people outside the bubble do. For example, the person I went to see Solo with is a friend of mine who a totally casual moviegoer. And she said to me, I didn't even know this movie was out. Okay, check the box of the marketing was bad. I agree with that. Those trailers did not showcase Alden as Han Solo. Ellis made the best point on Movie Talk, which was, he brought up the fact that it made half the money Rogue One did in its opening weekend. There's no way in hell that has to do with the response of The Last Jedi. Because the only people that give a shit about The Last Jedi being polarizing is maybe a portion of the most diehard Star Wars fans. My sister, my family who went to go see The Last Jedi with me, they all enjoyed it because it was a well-made movie. They don't care. They don't know about the shit that all of these other people use as ammo to hate the movie. They don't care. It's not how they think about it. So, throwing out, I know the Christian said this, but throwing out that they should take away Rian Johnson's trilogy, no, that's an inside the bubble type take, and I get it. I know that you might be coming from, that's your perspective, and I get it.
Real quick on that specifically, just using it as an example, talking about something like that on Harloff and Ellis is a great place to have that conversation. Talking about something like that on Jedi Council is a great place to have that conversation.
Yes,
and I think that's A-okay to do. I think it's just sort of difficult to sort of navigate through these waters. I don't know. The conversation this week was so much about how like regime change in right. Star Wars, and I actually I get that and I understand that as somebody coming from the outside because of what I know behind the scenes, but that's not how it was framed up. It was framed up because of the movie itself. And one thing that I found funny was I was watching this week of Movie Talk, and I thought, I'm confused because I'm pretty sure most of the people at this table, with the exception of Riley, really enjoyed this movie, but that's not what they're putting forward first, which as a fan, it seems like that's what I would put forward first. I really like this movie, so the reason why it's not making money, I don't quite understand or get, so here's how I'm going to make sense of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm glad you made that addendum, because you're right. Christian's perspective is valued because he does host Jedi Council, because he is
as is Mark's.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. And you're right, there's a different kind of conversation between each show. Absolutely. There's definitely potential for that. So I'm glad you made that correction. But I guess what I'm saying is something like Movie Talk, I wish that there was actual more inclusion in sort of the outside perspective, whereas I value and trust Christian to bring his diehard fandom perspective into when he hosts a show like that. And again, that's why I said the best conversation was Harloff and Ellis, because they were just able to talk about it for an extended period of time. And I guess the part that I did not value is that Rocha made a point that it came down to quality. He said the movie wasn't good and it performed. And it's like, no. Finances don't necessarily have anything to do with the quality of the film. Because if that was the case, Blade Runner 2049 would have a sequel going into production next year. It's like, it doesn't always translate that easily. So the fact that he chalked it up to people didn't go see this movie because it was bad, I don't think opening weekend numbers reflect that. So that was right. That was part of the hyperbole. Opening weekend numbers reflect marketing.
I mean, I made this point on Sight and Sound one time. We were debating Christopher Nolan stuff, and I brought up Inception. If you go back and look at how much Inception made, an insane amount of money. Not insane like Black Panther insane. It made a lot of money. a ton of money. If you go back and look at its opening box office weekend, it might as well be an indie film. It's just like it doesn't always
which movie
correlate. Inception.
Oh yeah,
Inception.
Yeah.
It doesn't always correlate. And in fact, the conversation of opening weekend numbers is so specifically pinpointed towards this bubble and this community that, listen, I get why it's done because it's a fun thing to talk about. It creates content. I get it. But to lean on it for an entire week, I just don't know if that's the best thing. Most people don't care about what the opening box office numbers, unless it's gone crazy. And yes, I get that it was a disappointment. Like, it was a disappointment, and that's a story. That's a narrative that only the movie media can really push forward. But it's just outside of that, like, I just don't think they care ultimately. So to sort of drum up content based around something that most people just don't care about, for me at least, it's just kind of like, man, I don't know. I feel like we're reaching a little bit. Let me go off on one other thing that I forgot about from this past week with Solo coverage that I did want to bring up, and thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome.
The reviews of Solo, the actual review videos that they're putting out. So I was surprised to see that the official Collider branded video that came out for Solo,
spoiler review?
for spoiler review and for non-spoiler review was done by Ken and Christian, the resident, like, other than Ellis, like the 100% like down and dirty nuts and bolts Star Wars fans who are just in the knowledge as deep as you can go. Because I personally would have liked to have seen them bring back the Jedi Council review of that show, because if I were to see a Jedi Council Solo review, I knew, because of branding, this was the place to go to see the die-hard, the most hardcore Star Wars fans take about the specific movie. I think a Collider branded review should be the most general review for a film that you could possibly have.
Okay.
The reason I'm saying that is because getting a perspective from Christian and Ken's view, somebody who reads everything, reads all the comic books, watches Clone Wars and Rebels, just gets so far into canon, they are going to have a very, very, very different perspective on the movie that is only unique to them and their fandom. I just dropped my phone. Their perspective and their fandom, it's going to be completely different to that of somebody that might not be as inundated with all this stuff. I mean, I don't even know who that would be. Like I don't know, maybe Roka. I mean, he didn't even know Darth Maul was canon, or maybe maybe Frank. Maybe you pull Frank out. I have no idea. I don't know. Somebody that's just more of a casual individual to talk about this stuff.
Did you see him say that, or did you get that from? Did I tell you about that this week?
Well, you told me it, and I just thought it was so funny that I had to go and watch it. The one who played it off the best, give Christian Harloff a pat on the back, because I don't know.
Christian did not have the reaction I had. I would not have been that nice.
I feel like inside Christian was saying, for all the times that you've been on Jedi Council, have you never heard me say, so what's the deal with canon?
And the fact that Roka had his own Star Wars show at Geek Nation, it's like, come on, Roka. Come on.
Yeah, it might have just been a flub, but it was a funny flub at that. So.
But anyway, to your point, you're absolutely right. That's just a great way to have additional voices talking about a particular movie, because if someone like Perry doesn't think the same way that Christian does about Star Wars, but like, I think as movie fans, we all want Star Wars to do well. So there should be a voice saying, like, this movie is pretty good. You should still go check it out. Like, was there ever a conversation on Collider that was like, I still think this movie is good. People think this movie is good. It's like, did anybody mention on Collider that it's still worth going to see? Or is every non-Star Wars fan going to be convinced by other Star Wars fans that it's not worthy of their money, when that's part of the hyperbole, because those people are already firing Kathleen Kennedy for her sins against humanity? It's like, a healthier balance would have helped me out this week.
So this isn't just a Collider thing. It's not even really their criticism. I think it's more and we've talked about this to death, but this is my last point, really. This is more the culture, I think, surrounding new media and all of this new movie news reporting stuff. I don't think it's a conscious thing where they sit there and plot out like Christian with the Schmoedown. If this happens, we can create this content. If this happens, we can create this content.
Right.
But I think anytime something doesn't go the way you think it is going to go, whether it's a divisive movie or it's a bad movie that people thought was going to be good, or it's a box office disappointment, so much content can be created off of the back of that, whether it be, here are the movies that we want. Here are our top 5 list of people to replace Kathleen Kennedy. Here are the people who we want to, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's all this content to be created. Again, I don't think it's a conscious effort by them to sort of plot that along. I think it's ingrained because of the culture of this space to go off in that direction. And I'm not saying there's necessarily anything wrong with it. I get it. I see the advantages of it. I'm honest about it. But man, I think once you've been in it for long enough, you can sort of see the cracks in the armor, and it's just like, man, I just feel like we're reaching. I've never felt it more than this week with some of the coverage. So that's all I've got. We beat the dead horse.
Speaking of involving new voices into movie reviews, let's fucking talk about Scott Mantz joining the Collider crew as the new host of Collider Movie Review Talk. I was so stoked about this news. What was your first reaction?
Yeah, so we actually did get this off air. It was sort of like something that was hinted to us a little bit. We were wondering about where Review Talk has been, because we sort of got it teased a while ago, and we got Spoiler Talk in its place, which I like. I like the place of that show, and I like the place and the idea of this new show. Let's not let anybody off easy here, okay? This is something that we brought up a while ago. Well, we've been championing, and allegedly Christian's have been working on this for a while, and I believe him. And I get it. I totally get it. Just joking. But we have been championing this idea of pushing personalities for quite a while now. And I think one of the examples of that, regardless of if it was being worked on or not, we're pretty smart. Our prime example was Scott Mantz, to include him in this space. He's such a well-respected individual in this space. He's such a movie fan, and it's not that other people here aren't movie fans, but his exuberance, his charisma, he literally wears it on his sleeve, and I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. I love the little teaser spot that he did on the Instagram feed. That's stuff that we need more of. We need more of that stuff. Because he was talking about, this is going to be a show where I'm going to review the big blockbusters, but I'm also going to talk about DVD releases, or not DVD, Blu-ray releases. I'm going to talk about indie films and stuff.
Streaming stuff too.
Yes, that is something Collider needs right now. I think there's a diehard group of movie fans out there that exist beyond the tentpole movies. I get why we talk so much about tentpole stuff. Of course I do, but there are other people that are starving for content, and this is the type of content that happens, again, outside of the news cycle, that I think can really benefit Collider. I don't know what they hope from this in terms of numbers. This is something that you need to give as much time as possible.
Yes.
If there's one thing that I'm just uber critical of about the channel, it's just letting things live on past when you think they should be killed.
Yeah.
I get that we're stretched for people to work on this stuff. I get that everybody's busy, but we've got to let certain things breathe a little bit longer, especially by recognizing the potential, and this show has so much fucking potential.
I do remember a conversation that we had not too long ago where the words out of my mouth were, can you imagine if Scott Mantz was able to come over, and I guess I didn't follow how it went down with Access Hollywood. Actually, to be fair, he might not be at Access Hollywood, or he might have not been there for a while. That's not something I was knowledgeable about. So I don't know exactly how that went down, but that was my question. Like, imagine if Scott Mantz left Access Hollywood and came to Collider. So with Snyder and now Scott Mantz, two big power moves, and I was delighted to hear. I do think Scott Mantz is he has his fandoms for sure, like Star Trek, but he does, and La La Land. He loves La La Land. I do think though he has the most, someone like a Perry. I think he's very good at being objective when it comes to his films and the films that he reviews. And I think he's just such a valued voice in the community. He's going to bring in something different to Collider. And again, like you said, I was actually really excited to hear that he's going to be talking about the streaming movies. He's going to have a panel of people to do it with. And I just love the idea of the show in general. I love the idea of it being a podcast as well. I don't know what the podcast plans are. I don't know if it's going to be its own feed. I don't know if it's going to be on Movie Talk or whatever. The only thing I'm not crazy about is the name of the show, but that's obviously the last thing that's going to matter if I end up loving everything about it. So
I think we need to coin it here. Just like, it's fine if it's called Movie Review Talk. I think we need to call it MRT. Like, just coin the the shortened version, MRT.
Is that
make
better?
Up the shirts.
Is it better?
Everything's better when you give it an abbreviation. One of the things, got a little bit of inside information about this show. I was curious as to who we would see on it, whether it would be like a rotating panel of Collider personalities, or if he was going to sort of use his Rolodex, so to speak, to bring in individuals to talk about some of this stuff. And what Christian had mentioned to me was that we have enough content already on the channel with Collider personalities. Not that Perry wouldn't be able to come on to talk about something, or that we wouldn't see familiar faces, but that Scott Mantz is so respected in the space that we were going to get to see a lot of potential reviewers that we have never seen before on Collider to come onto the show to talk about movies, which is super exciting. Also got confirmation that he is show running this show.
Yes.
It's his sandbox to play in, and that's so exciting just for Scott Mantz to get to make this show what he wants, because I hope it feels a little bit different than what we've got. I think this is the type of content that we were looking for after the town hall when we were talking about brand new shows, longer form shows, and I'm super excited. I'm so excited for Scott Mantz.
I'm thinking about when Christian had mentioned to me so many months ago. He told me, he said, "I'm tired of looking like a YouTube channel." They've made a lot of decisions over the past few months that keep them from looking like a YouTube channel. And this is just another. That's the first thing I thought of. Is especially if Mance is the showrunner, bringing in his sensibilities. I mean, let's face it. I think it would be a different kind of show if someone like Roca was producing it, and not to be even hard on Roca. It could be anybody. It could be Riley. The fact that it's going to have Scott Mance's sensibilities and hands all over it is the kind of, again, the power move that really excites me the most, and I just can't wait to see what this looks like. I'm already this show's biggest fan, so I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, definitely. Real quick, I do want to mention there's one person that I feel actually kind of bad for with this whole announcement. You know who that is?
Perry?
No. It's whoever is doing the camera switching for the show, because there is no way in hell that Scott Mantz writes out an outline and preps with all these graphics that he's going to talk about and sticks to it. I mean, this is a guy who on a whim will just like let his emotions go wild. I mean,
you think? I don't know. I think he's super professional though. I'm not saying he doesn't have character. I think he's just super professional with everything that he does.
I think he is, but like, for instance, if we got a review talk and all of a sudden we got somebody who can instigate some shenanigans on the show, like if Christian was on the show, or even Mark Ellis, like I feel like as a guest on his show, they could just incite some crazy, wild, and just wacky shit and get him all riled up, and just, I don't know, it could just go off the rails. Already going to throw it out there. If you want a pick, if you want to go to Vegas and put your bets on the dark horse or the long shot guest to ever show up on Scott Mantz's movie review talk, I'm getting like 100-1 odds on Josh McCouga. So you can go ahead and place that bet now.
Why?
Why do I give him the long shot bet? McCouga.
Yeah, I misheard you. That you're saying McCouga is nowhere near this show?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm with you.
In fact, I actually would love him to be on the show because I think it would be fun to get his take. Listen,
okay, that's the statement I'm
show.
saying why to.
Well, I want it because it seems like a lot of fun. Like as much as I can't really see McCouga like contributing to Scott Mantz's deep dive on movie stuff, I think he would be a lot of fun to have on the show, like with Scott Mantz. But I just need Brett on this show. Like, please get Brett on this show. It seems even less likely now that Scott Mantz like has it. But if Mantz is listening, and hopefully somebody can like send him a clip of this, I'm looking at you, Frank or Christian. Reach out to our boy Brett Sheridan. It will just be the greatest thing the show has ever done.
I really wish that on Movie Talk on Tuesday they could have cut from Roca just spitballing about Solo. I wish they could have cut to Brett. Brett would have looked at the camera, shrugged his shoulders, and said, "It was a good movie," and then that would have been it, and it would have been amazing. Yeah. Very, very excited. Did you see McCouga on the Monday show, the pre-tape show, the summer bracket, whatever it was?
I actually missed that.
Oh,
yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch that this week.
Okay, all right.
How was it?
It was all right. It was cool. The only reason why, and this is not Ellis's fault. Whoever came up with this idea, it's not that big of a deal. But whenever I leave those shows, it always just seems so predictable. You know what I mean? Because I know the second Mark Ellis, basically what they did a summer movie bracket, and they brought in like Batman 89 and Jaws and The Dark Knight and all of the best summer movies of the past 30, 40 years or whatever. They put them in a bracket and determined who was the champion. And it's like the second you hear Ellis get his hand on Jaws, he's just going to take it straight to the top. So some of it's predictable. It's like it's the one way that the top 50 superhero series wasn't interesting to me, because you just know that The Dark Knight is number one, and that's what makes that's the stuff that's uninteresting about movie discussion, is the stuff that's overly saturated, those kinds of takes, that kind of content. So that's the only thing, but it's also just harmless. They gave us a movie talk on Monday when they didn't have to, and I've been very vocal how I get frustrated on holidays because I'm at home or I might not have something to do, and I hate when my favorite shows don't have. It's just me being spoiled, and they didn't have to do that show, but they did anyway, so it's kind of hard to complain about it, but it was fine. Couple of other things. I'm pretty much done with the meat of the show, but I thought it was funny on Harloff and Ellis. They had a brief thing where they were bickering back and forth about editing their videos, and it sounded like a conversation that we would have. I thought it was pretty funny. Christian was drinking a LaCroix on his one-on-one with Freddie Prinze Jr., and he was drinking it out of like a chalice or some shit. It was like a wine glass, and it was just so funny to watch him pick it up from the table and take a drink from it. How
do you feel that he had Freddie Prinze Jr. on the show, knowing that you all have had a past beef?
I sort of thought to myself, I wonder if Christian's going to bring this up, and then I quickly realized there's no way in hell Christian ever mentions this in any way, shape, or form to Freddie Prinze Jr. on the show. That's how self-involved I am. But the thing about Freddie Prinze Jr., and the reason why he's such a fascinating person in my eyes, is that like we have our perception of Freddie Prinze Jr. It's hilarious that the guy that I remember on that romantic comedy that I watched on the airplane when I was 8 years old, and She's All That. It's funny how that guy, the guy who's been parodied by Chris Evans in Not Another Teen Movie, it's just funny how this guy's on Collider. it's funny how we just our pathways crossed again in this content, and obviously the more you learn about Freddie, the more fascinated you realize that he is, and he runs in a lot of circles that fascinate me. I love the topic of stand-up comedy. I love listening to people talk about stand-up comedy, and that's what I love about Christian and Ellis talking about the Comedy Store, things like that. So to hear about that on this episode, I love. Me, I'm a massive Bruce Lee fan. Freddie Prinze Jr.'s godfather is Bob Wall, who's someone who was in a couple of Bruce Lee's movies, a friend of Bruce Lee. So to kind of hear that connection as well, he's just a very fascinating individual. And to top it all off, he's Kanan on Star Wars Rebels. So, so far it's the most Snelling one-on-one with Christian Harloff, if you will. It's sort of the one that was made for me so far. So I'm about halfway through it. It's pretty good.
Well, I think Freddie Prinze Jr. On paper it'd be like for any casual fan, or maybe not even a casual fan, just anybody that just kind of pays attention to Collider would be like, oh, that's cool. They had Freddie Prinze Jr. on the show. I mean, his links with Schmoes in particular is actually pretty fascinating, considering that, like you said, he has so many links to both Mark and Christian. With Christian, obviously, with the Star Wars stuff, obviously his love and passion for fighting and mixed martial arts and boxing. He's so knowledgeable about that stuff. In fact, before even diving deep into the Colliderverse that we talk about today, he's been on the Fighter and the Kid podcast, my favorite podcast, a few times, and he's so knowledgeable and can talk so much about that, and that's obviously something that Christian shares an affinity for as well, even beyond Star Wars. And then, like you said, his stand-up sort of crossover, and at least what he dabbles in with the stand-up community. He has a podcast with Josh Wolf, and Josh Wolf is also a friend of both Christian and Mark. It's just all fascinating, and he just fits right into this whole community. And it's awesome. In fact, I'd love to see him just on more stuff in general. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to his Instagram profile?
I haven't, and I don't know why I don't follow him.
He's like one of the most fascinating Instagram profiles to follow. He talks about food, like his love for food. He plays video games. Like he just seems like a huge fan of nerd culture, and I don't think it's something you ever would have guessed just by his like IMDb profile and persona, but he's welcomed in the space with open arms.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. And another thing about one-on-one, and this is sort of the last thing I've got, Christian Harloff is fucking getting it with these guests. So much, in fact, I cannot keep up because he is announcing people. He's announcing a certain list of names, and then the people that show up on his Instagram story, like he was talking to Jason Mitchell from Straight Outta Compton today, and it's like, where did that come from? He is getting it, and it's awesome. It's awesome, and I did not expect one-on-one to take off in this particular way, it's really cool. It's really, really cool. So I'm proud of him, and I'm proud of that show. It's I'm liking it a lot.
Well, I think one-on-one has such a fascinating appeal because it's got this built-in audience of movie fans, and then you can go even deeper into certain niche communities like Star Wars and comic book fans. And to start a show, just a pretty standard and straightforward interview type of podcast to live in this specific community, a lot of companies, a lot of advertisers, they look at stuff like this. It's like, ooh, what other companies can we cross over? What other individuals can we cross over to appeal to this built-in audience that we've already got? And I think it's fascinating. His announcing of different people to be on the show, it's so hard to keep up with. Like I don't, not in a bad way. It's obviously a good thing, but I'm like, who's coming this week? Like it legitimately shocked and surprised me that Freddie Prinze Jr. was going to be on this week. Mm-hmm. And then I questioned, I was like, did he even announce this? Like who else is in the pipe ready to be smoked?
Is that a saying?
Well, they say we've got one in the pipe, but okay. So that's always how I took it.
Okay. Anyway, do you have anything else?
That's pretty much all I got, man. It's a solid week of content. We've got the live Schmoedown coming up, which I'm very, very excited for. It's official. It is completely sold out. So congratulations to everybody at Collider. Congratulations to everybody involved in the Schmoedown for your first official sold out show. It's a big deal. I hope for more stuff like this in the future. I hope for more live stuff in general from Collider in the future.
Yeah.
We've talked about that a lot these last few weeks, so I'm excited to see it.
Other things to look forward to. Collider Heroes is approaching its 250th episode. So Schnet promised it to be action-packed. It's probably going to be a longer episode. It's probably going to have quite a few of the Collider Heroes on board. So I'm really excited for that. So that's coming up. Jay and I are recording this on a Thursday evening. I've only seen a bit of Jedi Council. We'll talk more about it next week. I know that it did go live, and I know that it took 45 minutes to talk about the main topic, and apparently they ended it abruptly, and that's all I've got for you. That's interesting. And when Jay and I record next week, unless we can get a little bit information, maybe we could see it early, as a matter of fact. Jay and I will not be able to touch on movie review talk next week because it debuts next Friday. So unless we abuse our privilege, we will not be able to talk about it until the very next week. Does that pretty much cover it?
Yeah, man, I think that's it.
Are you a fan of Ken Knapsack? Because if you are, Ken Knapsack stopped by Sight and Sound to give me his top 10 movies that every film fan should see. I call it the movie bucket list show. It's on Sight and Sound. That's what Jay and I do. It's our bread and butter. You can find Ken Knapsack's movie bucket list on the Sight and Sound podcast feed and the Sight and Sound YouTube channel. Links to all of that good stuff is in the description down below. We are also very soon we're going to be announcing and publishing a Patreon page. So if you are a fan of what Jay and I do, even if it's not with Sight and Sound, even if you want to support me and Jay because of Collider Afterthoughts, we will have that Patreon coming for you guys very shortly. We will keep you up to date. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell.
Is it my turn?
Hold on. Let's go to Goodman first. Goodman? Oh, that's right. We fired him. Anyway, Jaye Williams, go ahead.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Jaye Williams. J to the A to the Y to the E. It's the same for both. You can also find us on Sight and Sound. Like Ryan said, he's talking about movie stuff. I'm talking about music stuff. Just launched a brand new show. Not a brand new show. It's Sight and Sound Music every single week. Myself, our good friend Brando, we're breaking down the new releases, all the new music. So that new Kanye album that's coming out, or I guess it's already out when you're listening to this, we're going to be breaking it down, talking about it, what we liked, what we didn't like. You can find that on our podcast feed, link in the description below. Also on our YouTube channel. That's all I've got.
This will be on the SK Plus YouTube channel, so be on the lookout for that. And Cody Hall, this episode will be exported with your settings in mind because we love you. Until next week, take it easy.